The boy stood under the stage lights and said one sentence. Simon Cowell raised his hand and said, "Stop, stop, stop." That sentence was the one thing his father never said. The America's Got Talent stage. Thousands of lights. 4 judges at the red desk. Cameras rolling live. Millions watching from home. Another Tuesday night audition in Los Angeles. The boy walked onto the stage. 12 years old? Maybe 90 pounds. Wearing a dress shirt that looked slightly too big, dark pants, shoes that had been polished carefully. His hands trembled as he held the microphone. Host Terry Crews greeted him with his trademark energy. "Welcome to America's Got Talent. What's your name, young man?" "My name is Daniel Cooper," the boy said, his voice quiet, barely carrying to the judge's desk 20 feet away. "I'm from Phoenix, Arizona." "And how old are you, Daniel?" 12. 12 years old. "And what are you going to do for us today?" Daniel looked down at the microphone in his hands. When he looked back up, his eyes were already glistening. "I'm going to sing a song. But first, I need to tell you something. About my dad." The audience settled. Simon Cowell, sitting at the far end of the judge's desk in his signature black shirt, leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed. The usual posture. The familiar skepticism. He'd seen thousands of kids with sad stories. Producers loved putting them through emotional manipulation. He'd learned to spot it. "My dad died 3 months ago," Daniel said, and his voice cracked. "Cancer. He fought for 2 years but—" He stopped, composing himself. "He was everything to me. He taught me to sing. He drove me to every lesson. He sat with me while I practiced. He believed in me when nobody else did." Simon's expression didn't change. Standard audition narrative. Dead parent. Sympathetic backstory. He'd heard it 100 times. "But there was one thing," Daniel continued, and now tears were streaming down his face. "One thing he never said to me. Not once in 12 years. Not even at the end when he was dying in the hospital, and I was holding his hand." The judges leaned forward slightly. Howie Mandel's smile faded. Heidi Klum's hand moved to her chest. Sofia Vergara's eyes widened. "He never told me he loved me." The audience gasped. A ripple of sound through the theater. Daniel wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "He wasn't a bad dad. He wasn't mean. He just couldn't say it. I don't know why. Maybe his dad never said it to him. Maybe he didn't know how. But I waited my whole life to hear those 3 words and they never came." Simon stopped the show. No one knew what was happening. Simon's arms uncrossed. He sat forward in his chair, both hands coming down flat on the desk in front of him. His face had changed. The skepticism gone, replaced by something raw and unguarded. "Hold on," Simon said, his voice sharp, cutting through the emotional atmosphere. "Stop. Just stop for a second." Terry Crews looked confused. The other judges turned to Simon. The audience fell silent. The control room erupted into chaos, producers shouting into headsets, trying to figure out what was happening. Daniel stood frozen on stage, the microphone lowering slightly, unsure what he'd done wrong. Simon raised both hands, palms facing the stage. "Daniel, before you sing, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with me." "Okay," Daniel whispered. "Did your father know you were auditioning for this show?" Daniel nodded, fresh tears falling. "It was his idea. 3 weeks before he died, he made me promise I'd try out. He said I was good enough. He said I should show the world what I could do. But he never told you he loved you." "No, sir." Simon stood up. Abruptly. The kind of standing that made the whole theater go silent. In 15 seasons of judging talent shows, Simon Cowell rarely stood during auditions. When he did, something significant was about to happen. He stepped out from behind the judge's desk and walked toward the stage. The cameras followed him. The other judges watched in stunned silence. Howie mouthed, What is he doing? To Heidi. Terry Crews stood off to the side, completely still, sensing that something beyond television was occurring. Simon stopped at the edge of the stage, looking up at Daniel, who stood 10 feet above him under the lights. Daniel, Simon said, his voice softer now, almost gentle. I'm going to tell you something I've never said on this show before. Something I've never said publicly. The boy waited, confused, scared, hopeful all at once. My father died when I was young too. Not as young as you, but young enough. And you know what he never said to me? The same thing. Those 3 words. He was British, proper, emotionally distant. He showed love through work, through providing, through being there. But he never said it. Not once. Not even at the end. The audience was completely silent. Howie had tears on his face. Sophia was crying openly. Heidi's hand was still over her heart. And for years, Simon continued, decades actually, I told myself it didn't matter. That I didn't need to hear it. That actions speak louder than words. That I was fine. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. But I wasn't fine. Because you know what I learned? Sometimes we need to hear the words. Sometimes actions aren't enough. Sometimes a child needs their father to say I love you out loud, needs to hear it with their own ears, needs that confirmation that they matter, that they're valued, that they're enough. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this performance is still ahead. Daniel was sobbing now, the microphone hanging loose in his hand. Simon reached into his pocket and pulled out a white handkerchief, the same handkerchief he always carried, the one given to him by his own father 40 years ago, the only physical thing he had left from the man who never said those 3 words. Come here, Simon said gently, gesturing to the edge of the stage. Daniel walked forward slowly, carefully, until he was standing at the very front of the stage, looking down at Simon. Simon held up the handkerchief. This was my father's. It's the only thing I kept. And I'm going to tell you something that I wish someone had told me when I was your age, standing where you're standing, waiting for words that never came. He took a breath. The entire theater waited. Your father loved you. He loved you more than anything in this world. I know that because he sat through your lessons. He drove you everywhere. He believed in you. He made you promise to audition for this show even when he was dying. That's not what someone does unless they love you with every fiber of their being. Daniel's shoulders shook with sobs. But here's what you need to understand. Simon continued, his own eyes now wet with tears he wasn't bothering to hide. His inability to say those words wasn't about you. It was about him. About his own father. About patterns that get passed down through generations. About men who were taught that love is something you show, not something you say. He stepped closer to the stage. And I know that doesn't make it hurt less. I know you still needed to hear it. I know there's a hole where those words should be. But Daniel, I'm standing here, and I'm going to say what your father couldn't. What he should have said every single day but didn't know how. Simon looked directly into the boy's eyes. You are loved. You are so deeply, profoundly loved. And you are enough. Exactly as you are. You don't have to earn it through perfect performances or achievements or proving yourself. You are worthy of love just because you exist. Backstage, producers were begging him to continue, but he didn't. The audience erupted. Not in applause yet, something deeper. A collective sob that rippled through 3,000 people. Strangers crying together, each one carrying their own version of Daniel's story. Their own absent parent. Their own unspoken words. Their own holes where I love you should have been. Terry Crews was crying. The camera operators were crying. In the control room, the director had given up trying to manage the moment, and was just letting the cameras roll. Simon climbed onto the stage. The producers in his ear were screaming, Simon, you can't, protocol, insurance. He pulled out his earpiece and dropped it on the stage floor. He walked to Daniel and knelt down in front of him, bringing himself to the boy's eye level. He took the handkerchief, his father's handkerchief, the sacred object he'd carried for 40 years, and gently wiped the tears from Daniel's face. "Now," Simon said softly, "I want you to sing. Not for the judges. Not for the audience. Not for the cameras or the votes or any of that. I want you to sing for your father. Sing the song you would have sung if he was here. Sing it like he's listening." "What if I mess up?" Daniel whispered. "Then you mess up. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you show up. That you do the thing he believed you could do. That you prove him right." Simon stood, placed the handkerchief in Daniel's hand, and walked back to the judge's desk. The music started. A simple piano melody. Daniel closed his eyes, held the microphone close, and began to sing. The song was "You Raise Me Up," a choice so predictable it would normally have made Simon roll his eyes. But the way Daniel sang it, voice cracking with grief and love and loss and hope all tangled together, transformed it into something transcendent. Halfway through the second verse, something extraordinary happened. Daniel's voice broke. He stopped singing. Stood there under the lights, crying, unable to continue. The music kept playing. The audience held its breath. The judges watched, frozen. And then Simon did something that would be replayed millions of times, analyzed and discussed and shared across the world. He walked back onto the stage, took the microphone from Daniel's trembling hands, and he finished the song. Simon Cowell, who never sang, who mocked singers for a living, who built an empire on harsh criticism, sang the final verse of "You Raise Me Up" in his untrained, imperfect voice, while holding a 12-year-old boy who had never heard his father say, "I love you." But what happened next, no one in the theater, or watching at home, could ever forget. When the music stopped, the audience stood. Every single person. 3,000 people on their feet, applauding, crying, bearing witness to something that transcended talent competitions and television and entertainment. The other judges stood too. Howie, Heidi, Sophia, all on their feet, hands over their hearts. Simon handed the microphone back to Daniel. He kept his hand on the boy's shoulder. "You don't need my approval," Simon said, his voice carrying through the theater without amplification. "You don't need a golden buzzer or 4 yes or to win this competition. You already have everything you need. Your father gave it to you. Not in words, but in action. In belief. In the promise he made you keep." He paused. "But I'm going to give you something anyway." Simon walked to the judge's desk, placed his hand on the golden buzzer, and pressed it. Golden confetti exploded across the stage. The audience screamed. Daniel fell to his knees, still clutching Simon's father's handkerchief. Simon stood beside him, one hand on the boy's shoulder, tears streaming down his face. Terry Crews rushed onto the stage and embraced them both. The other judges joined them, all 5 people standing in golden confetti, crying, holding this 12-year-old boy who had finally heard the words he needed. "Your father loved you," Simon said one more time, quiet enough that only Daniel could hear. "And so do we. Share and subscribe, so this story will never be forgotten." After the show, Simon gave Daniel the handkerchief permanently. "Keep it. My father would want you to have it. Pass it to your son someday. Break the cycle." Daniel went on to the finals. He didn't win the competition. But that didn't matter. Because on that stage, in that moment, something more important than talent was healed. 3 months after the audition, Daniel's mother sent Simon a letter. She told him that her husband had watched every season of AGT from his hospital bed during his final year. He made her promise to get Daniel to audition, even though he knew he wouldn't live to see it. In his final week, unable to speak, he'd written something on a piece of paper and made her seal it in an envelope with instructions. "Give this to Daniel after his audition." The envelope had sat unopened for 3 months because Daniel couldn't bear to read it. But after Simon's words on that stage, after hearing what he needed to hear, Daniel finally opened it. Inside was a single sentence in his father's shaky handwriting. "I was never good with words, but you made me proud every single day. That's my way of saying it. Simon framed that letter. It hangs in his office next to a photograph of him and Daniel on stage, covered in golden confetti. Under it, a small plaque reads, "Some fathers show love. Some say it. Both matter." Share and subscribe, so this story will never be forgotten. Every year on the anniversary of that audition, Simon sends Daniel a new white handkerchief. A reminder. A tradition. A way of saying what words sometimes can't. Simon never got his father's original handkerchief back. And he never wanted to. Some things are meant to be given away. Some cycles are meant to be broken. Some words, even when they come late, can still heal.